Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking on a single, really profound question, one that you've shared with us through some fascinating source material.
Mm-hmm.
If existence was meant to be perfect, why did suffering have to enter the design?
It really is the ultimate paradox, isn't it? And for this, we're looking at a very specific text, The Purpose of Pain, the architect's silent teacher.
Right.
And what's so compelling here is that it frames this not as a mistake, not as a moral failing, but as a deliberate essential mechanism.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really analyze this specific narrative, this creation myth. We're not getting into why bad things happen to good people in a moral sense.
Yeah.
We're exploring why, according to this text, the very architecture of reality required discomfort. We're unpacking this really stunning claim that suffering emerged not as cruelty, but as a silent teacher.
A necessary teacher.
So our guiding question is this. If Brahma created the universe in perfection, why did suffering enter existence?
To get to the answer, we have to start where the text starts.
Right.
With the initial state of creation.
Okay. The sources describe it as, well, a paradise, pure abundance. Everything was instantly provided. The environment was completely nurturing. It was a seamless, smooth, almost frictionless existence.
A static perfection. I think when we hear paradise, that's what we imagine. A place where you don't have to strive for anything.
Right.
But if the goal was a conscious, evolving existence, why was that a problem? What was the flaw that Brahma saw in that kind of effortless ease?
The problem was a kind of internal inertia. The architect observed that, well, life existed in abundance, sure, but fulfillment remained incomplete.
Incomplete how?
There was sustenance, there was pleasure, but there was no depth. Because there was no challenge, the beings had no real reason to reflect or to innovate or even to question their own existence.
So comfort sustained them, but it kept them shallow. The source material calls it shallow awareness. What does that actually mean? What were they doing if they weren't suffering?
They were, in essence, just operating on a surface level.
Okay.
Think of the difference between, say, watching a beautiful film and actually writing one.
Mm-hmm.
They could experience the beauty of creation, but they lacked the necessary friction to develop complex emotion or deep memory or any kind of self-generated meaning.
So they lived, they enjoyed things, but they never really understood why.
Exactly. Their lives were entirely reactive,
Yeah.
just responding to the goodness of the environment around them.
It sounds a bit like high-functioning stagnation.
Yeah.
Everything is working perfectly, but nothing is actually advancing.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like a piece of software that's read-only. It can run its program, but it can't learn, it can't adapt, it can't rewrite its own code.
That is an excellent modern analogy, yes. The creation was complete, but the consciousness within it was fundamentally incomplete. And so Brahma's realization, the core principle, was that consciousness cannot deepen without resistance.
Without resistance.
A system built only on ease, no matter how beautiful, actually prevents the transformation of the self. The beauty was static. The architect needed dynamic evolution. So the solution wasn't to fix the beings themselves, but to change the entire system. And this is the big twist in the text.
It is.
The introduction of pain wasn't an accident. It wasn't a punishment. It was a deliberate design choice. A force meant to provoke movement and, maybe more importantly, to provoke inquiry.
Yes, to move creation from just being to becoming.
And the text has a key term for this.
It does. It makes it very clear. It says suffering emerged as friction, not as punishment, not as cruelty.
Friction.
And that friction is mechanical. It's the resistance you need for any system to generate heat or effort or, useful movement. This is the moment you realize pain isn't meant to stop life. It's meant to start the process of deeper consciousness.
That distinction is so vital. Between friction and punishment. I think that's the hardest part of this for anyone to internalize.
Of course.
Punishment implies you did something wrong. There's a judgment. But friction is just a necessary process to achieve a function. Friction is what lets a wheel grip the road. It causes wear, sure, but without it, you just spin in place. You go nowhere.
Exactly. The pain, the friction, it compelled beings to reflect, to question why they were content in the first place, and, most importantly, to seek meaning beyond just what was on the surface.
Right.
When a path is easy, you don't think about it, but when it's blocked by a challenge, by pain, you have to stop. You have to look inward and figure out a new way forward. You have to create a meaning to overcome it.
But here's the challenge that I imagine you, the listener, are grappling with right now. And it's one the sources have to address. For so many, pain is just senseless. It feels like destructive cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we square the text idea of a silent teacher with the very real experience of trauma or just overwhelming hardship? Does the source draw a line between useful friction and destructive cruelty?
It does, but implicitly. It does it by defining the function of the friction.
Okay.
The text suggests the system was designed to force a chase. You can either reflect or you can despair. If the suffering leads you to question yourself, to search for a deeper meaning, then it's working as intended. It's being the silent teacher.
And if it doesn't?
Then the suffering that leads to a purely destructive breakdown is, in this framework, a result of failing to engage that reflective mechanism, the very thing the friction was designed to trigger.
I see. So the suffering itself isn't the flaw. The flaw is, or can be, our failure to transmute that discomfort into inquiry.
Precisely. And that frames the human struggle as a kind of secondary design feature, the ability or the challenge to find meaning in the hardship.
The suffering is the teacher, but it only speaks when the smooth surface of our easy lives gets disrupted.
That's right. And that realization, that's what can shift this from just a philosophical idea to something you can actually apply. These experiences of discomfort, seen this way, become lessons.
Okay, let's turn to that application. This is where the story becomes a practical guide for how we might approach difficulty in our own lives. The source outlines 3 specific lessons.
Yes. And the first lesson directly challenges our modern instinct, which is, to eliminate all pain at any cost.
Yeah.
The text states, "Not all discomfort is a flaw. Some challenges exist to awaken awareness. We are experts at optimizing for comfort. But, according to this view, comfort is precisely what keeps our consciousness asleep."
Discomfort is the alarm clock. That makes so much sense. I mean, think about physical health. We ignore small things.
Yeah.
A bad diet, not enough sleep, for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We ignore it until the discomfort becomes real pain. And that pain isn't a flaw in the system. It's the body's emergency signal, finally forcing us to pay attention to something we were happily ignoring.
That is a perfect illustration. It forces us to realize, okay, I'm not fully awake here. The status quo isn't working. And that shifting perspective is profound. It means when you feel that strain, that emotional or intellectual unease, you should pause.
Not to numb it.
Not to numb it or run from it, but to ask, what neglected part of myself is this trying to awaken?
We spend so much energy fighting the alarm instead of just listening to the message.
Yeah.
And that leads perfectly into the second lesson, which seems to go even deeper.
It does. The second lesson draws a sharp line between 2 ways of living. It says, ease sustains life, but struggle transforms understanding.
I find that contrast so powerful because it separates survival from fulfillment. They're 2 totally different things.
Completely.
Ease sustains you. It keeps the lights on. It keeps you going.
Yeah.
But struggle is what actually changes your inner world. I think about a student who's just handed all the answers for a test
Yes.
versus a student who has to wrestle with a hard problem for hours. The one who struggled is the one who transforms their whole understanding of the subject. They build new muscles. The other one just has temporary information.
The struggle forces an internal investigation. When things are easy, we just operate on the surface. We know what to do. But struggle makes us ask why we're doing it and who we need to become to get through it.
Yeah.
The friction of the effort is what burns away all the superficial stuff.
So the architect's goal wasn't just to sustain life. It was to transform understanding. And the only tool that could kickstart that transformation was difficulty. It's like learning to sail. If you're just floating on a calm pond, you're being sustained. But if you're out there fighting the wind and the currents, that's when you're transformed into a sailor.
A beautiful analogy. And this need for transformation brings us to the third lesson, which is maybe the most practical one for anyone listening. It's the trigger point for growth. It simply states, growth begins when comfort ends.
That's the boundary line, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you feel totally comfortable, you're in that sustaining phase. The second you step outside that zone, physically, emotionally, intellectually, that's when the growth process starts.
It has to. It's only when our old, easy habits stop working that we're forced to innovate, to evolve our perspective.
It forces a self-overhaul. Like in a relationship, when you hit a point of friction that feels impossible, your comfort has ended.
Right. And you have 2 choices. You can retreat back to what was comfortable, which means the relationship probably ends. Or you can do the deep, uncomfortable work of transforming how you communicate, how you understand the other person.
And that transformation only happens because the pain of the friction becomes greater than the comfort of staying the same.
Exactly.
So this gives you, the listener, a clear metric. If you feel like you're stagnating, you're probably operating inside your comfort zone. To grow, you have to deliberately seek the point where that comfort ends.
It places the responsibility for transformation directly on the individual.
So if we pull this all together, Brahma's observation, the design choice of friction, these three lessons, we get to the final layer. What this all means for how we should approach pain itself.
It means we have to change our core assumption about it. We have to view pain, at least according to this text, not as a punishment or an error, but as a strategic tool.
A tool for transformation.
The dynamic element that sparks the evolution of consciousness. It moves us from just existing to actually engaging in a meaningful inquiry about our existence.
The initial perfect creation was static, immobile. And the introduction of suffering was what allowed the self to deepen, to allow creation to, I guess, interact with its own meaning.
The pain itself is the education. It forces us to ask the big questions that we would just ignore in a state of endless ease. Questions like, why do I need to change? And what is the purpose of this?
This has been a true deep dive. We started with a paradox: why would perfection include pain? And we've ended with this idea that pain was the very element that unlocked the potential for real meaning and fulfillment. It's a total reframing of adversity.
It is. And yet the source material leaves us with one final critical thought, a continuation line for you to carry forward.
Yeah.
The text notes that the architect's work wasn't finished just by introducing pain, it says. Yet suffering alone was not enough. Beings needed meaning to endure it.
So friction is the catalyst that pushes us out of comfort. But meaning must be the fuel that keeps us going on that difficult journey.
Without it, the friction just leads to breakdown, to despair. It doesn't lead to transformation.
So that really sets the stage for the next inquiry. If suffering is the great teacher, then our next question has to be about the nature of meaning itself. What is that substance we need to transmute friction into fulfillment?